I'm Vicki Hogarth and welcome to Southwest Magazine. My guest today is the MP of Southwest New Brunswick, John Williamson. Thank you for being here today, John.
Thank you, Vicki. It's good to be back.
We have a lot I want to discuss and our regular sitting down to talk about the local issues. But first and foremost, there's likely an election that is going to be called, which we didn't really know about when we scheduled this sit down. But can you tell me what you know from the Ottawa perspective?
Well, the news that's breaking is that an election will be called on the weekend. So when many of your viewers see this, we could well be in an election. Now, that's not for sure. It's only a news report. For a vote near the end of September. So that's all we know now. But there's been a sense in Ottawa, really since Parliament was sitting in the spring, that there would likely be an election sometime over the summer, over the late summer. The Prime Minister's thinking is that he believes he needs to refresh his majority, or rather his government. I think he wants to win a majority. I don't accept that. I think he is governing safely now. The NDP has said it will support the Liberal government for another 2 years left in this term. But when you're the Prime Minister, you get to decide when the election is going to be in a minority. And so it looks like Justin Trudeau is going to roll the dice and call the election very, very soon. Okay, well, Dr. Tam was saying this week that it looks like Canada really is in the start of a fourth wave. Does that seem to be problematic in the timeline of the election in your eyes? I mean, I think that's going to be an issue that Justin Trudeau is going to have to answer. I mean, we've been told for the last 17 months to stay safe, to be prudent, and now the Prime Minister seems to be throwing that aside at the same time as this fourth wave is rolling in. So, from my perspective, that could have an impact on who votes, who feels comfortable voting, and it could have an impact on voter turnout. So it's going to mean that candidates are going to be working hard, going to communities. I'm just not sure how voters are going to react to that. But if people kind of give me the gears at the doors for being there, some will accept it, some might be upset. I'm just going to point it back to Justin Trudeau, because there's no need to have this election that he's calling. We could wait until things are safer, but as I said, when you're the Prime Minister, you make these decisions. I should mention, we're filming this on Friday the 13th of August. We just found out this week there's speculation it will be called the 15th Sunday, which means this show will be up for 2 days. We'll have to follow election guidelines, take it off the air so that we give all the candidates equal time. So this might be a 2-day episode. Yes. That's why I'm going to acknowledge the time right now. What is the projected timeline for when the election would be? If it's called Sunday, maybe Monday, we don't know exactly. It would be 30, well, again, it could be as little as 36 days. That's a speculation, but it could run into 50 days as well. I don't think that will happen. I think, again, I'm trying to speculate what the Liberals are thinking. I think they're hoping to go quick and try to win the seats they need. But I think there's going to be, I think they're in for a bit of a surprise. I think people are not focused on elections right now. I think people are trying to get over the pandemic, through the pandemic. They're enjoying time with their families, time outside, and they might be suspicious of why a Prime Minister that can govern safely is going to the polls now when he could govern for another 2 years with the support of the NDP. Mm-hmm.
Two bills that have been in the news a lot that people have read about: Bill C6, Bill C10. Before we get into the details of those bills, what happens to a bill and the progress that's been made on it when an election is called?
So good question, yeah. So the end of Parliament, we had a busy session. There were 4 bills that the government was really focused on. The budget bill, a bill on COVID relief, C10, which dealt with, it was a huge bill. It dealt with, in part, telecoms, internet, community television, and then, of course, Bill C6. Two of those bills have passed the Senate, and they became law. The other 2 are in the Senate right now. Bill C10 and Bill C6. Plus, there's many other bills still in the House of Commons. If an election is called, those bills die. Even if the government is re-elected, if the Liberals are re-elected, those bills start back at square one again, and they proceed forward. So it can mean adding years to a piece of legislation, because once you're in the Senate, you're basically on the 95-yard line. You're almost through. The House of Commons has gone through its study. The Senate does take its work seriously, but it generally defers to the House of Commons. So these bills without an election would probably become law before Christmas. but with an election, it could be years before they become law again.
Okay, Bill C6, obviously something that is polarizing. Your critics would say that it looks like you are saying you are not against conversion therapy. I read on your website that you say that you are against conversion therapy. It's the wording of the bill as it was.
So yeah, let me take a step for those that don't follow this issue, because this is one of the bills. So Bill C6 was brought before Parliament almost 2 years ago, and it seeks to end the practice of conversion therapy. Now, I agree with most other parliamentarians that practice should not be allowed in Canada. It should be made illegal. My critics have noted rightly that I voted against the bill along with about 50 or 60 other members of Parliament. The bill passed the House of Commons despite my concerns with the bills. And I voted against the bill for the primary reason it was poorly drafted. And here's why that matters. From the beginning, we were looking for language that would clarify that yes, conversion therapy would be not permitted in Canada, but that conversations between family members would not be criminalized. And in fact, the Liberals said that was the intent of the bill, not to make conversations between family members a criminal activity. But they wouldn't clarify that in the bill, despite our efforts to propose those amendments in committee. So in the end, I had a choice to make, and I believe it's the responsibility of parliamentarians to write bills that explain what they mean and not leave it up to courts to decide how they should be interpreted. And so there was a problem with the bill where it wasn't clear. I thought we should clarify it. The Liberals disagreed, and they had the votes to get it through anyway.
So where do we go next with Bill C6? How, if there is an election, what is the process, and what could a ban on conversion therapy? How would it get your support? What would you need to see?
Oh, well, very simply. In fact, I mean, I have signaled that if what the Liberals say is true, that their intent is not to criminalize family discussions, and they include that in the bill, I'd vote for it. In fact, the Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole has said that should he win an election, a Conservative government would put forward a piece of legislation that would have the same spirit as the bill that was passed in Parliament or in the House of Commons a few months ago, but would ensure those discussions aren't subject to a police investigation. And I think that's very reasonable. And this is not a question of playing politics. I think legislation matters how it's written. In fact, in my first term, when the Harper government put forward a bill on warrantless internet surveillance, I thought it was a bad bill. And at the time, the Conservative public safety minister said, "You're either with us or you're with child predators." I thought that was outrageous, and I spoke out against that bill. It was a Conservative bill. It was poorly written, and I said it needed to change. So in the end, that bill died, and I was happy for that, even though it was a Conservative bill. Today, you have a bill C6 that's before Parliament, but it could die because of Justin Trudeau. And people that want to see this bill become law should really be calling the Prime Minister's office and say, don't call an election. Because if you call an election, it could be years before C6 or a bill like it becomes law. So there's some politics going on here. Obviously, if there's no election, Parliament gets back to work on September 20th, and that bill will be studied by the Senate, and I think become law by Christmas. With an election, it goes right back to square one. 3 readings in the House, 3 readings in the Senate, and could be some time before it becomes law.
So what do residents of Southwest New Brunswick do if they do want to see that ban on conversion therapy happen now that we go back to square one?
I mean, unfortunately, I think we're going to have this election, and so, for those that it's like for any group out there, they want to see change. They're going to have to go back to parliamentarians, and start back at the drawing board. And that's the system has weaknesses. One is that all bills die before when election happens. I mean, I've been on both sides of that with bills I wanted to see passed, which didn't get through. And so it's going to be more hard work for advocates of that bill and many other bills that are before Parliament.
So I guess that goes without saying that Bill C-10 will be in a similar position. It's something we've obviously cared about here at the TV station, the Broadcasting Act.
Exactly. And again, like that's another good bill. Like Bill 10, C-10 had provisions that I agreed with, specifically to ensure that foreign multinationals are paying taxes and contributing to Canadian culture the same way that Canadian businesses do. But as you know, the bill also included some serious restrictions on how Ottawa could control how Canadians share social media. So despite my agreeing with part of the bill, I ended up voting against C-10. I've become a ferocious critic of it. I think that bill needs to be stopped in this form that allows federal bureaucrats to control what could be shared on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you name it. I mean, that is an affront to our freedoms as Canadians and needs to be stopped.
Okay, can we talk a little bit about something? I'm going to pivot and go right to the border. The border on Monday, open to Americans coming into Canada. It's not reciprocated. We can't go to the U.S. as non-essential travelers the same way by a land border. What is your perspective on this decision?
So I think it's a problem because, first of all, I'll say a lot of people in Charlotte County have concerns. We see this fourth wave is growing both in the United States and parts of Canada. And the federal government put in place a protocol that allows foreign travelers to come here, visitors. Now, while I think there are a lot of safeguards in place, people are uneasy. So I think we need to be very cautious here about who comes up, and I have a lot of assurances that our border guards are doing a good job screening people. We see cars being turned away. But what concerns me is again how Justin Trudeau we don't have half a loaf. Why is it Americans can come visit Canada, but Canadians cannot visit their loved ones in Maine or New England or elsewhere? And this is where I think Justin Trudeau dropped the ball, because for months it was Americans demanding the border be open. The senator in Maine, lawmakers all across the northern part of the United States demanding that the border be open. And so what happens? We open the border, and the United States doesn't. Justin Trudeau should have said, either we're going to hold off until you open the border, Mr. Biden, and we'll do it together. But he didn't do that, and I don't understand why. This is where I think Mr. Trudeau is sometimes not in tune with the best interest of Canadians. And again, I would have liked to have seen a partnership where Canadians who have family on this side could visit their family and relatives in Maine, but that didn't happen. And so we have this odd situation where Americans can come here, but Canadians can't visit New England or elsewhere.
From what you know from an Ottawa perspective, we're expecting again for the Americans, for the Biden administration to reconsider letting Canadians in for non-essential reasons. I believe it's August 21st is the next renewal. Any feeling from your perspective on what the decision will be? Will it be prolonged, this delay?
I mean, I don't know. I assume not, because I suspect there's probably a lot of pressure on the Trudeau government to ensure that Canadians can get there. I mean, I spoke to a constituent the other day who her partner is in Machias, and she traveled there one time. She had to fly St. John, Montreal, Boston to Bar Harbor, and then drive to Machias. This is someone who should be able to cross the border, because if Americans can cross here, if it's safe for Americans to cross here, it ought to be safe for Canadians to cross into America. I hope the Trudeau government's taking that into account, but I don't know, because if we're having this election, you can bet that all business at the federal government's going to freeze as well. So I just don't know. I mean, again, this is where I think Mr. Trudeau is putting his own political interest ahead of both the health of Canadians, but also the welfare of the country.
I always have to ask you about Campbello when you're here, and how this is affecting residents of Campbello. Obviously, they have not a year-round ferry. We're coming into fall again. There was a temporary solution last year. Is there any update in terms of whether there can be a federal, provincial partnership on bringing a year-round ferry?
Yeah. So again, the good thing is we have the ferry through to September. And as well, we have the agreement in place where Campbello residents can cross through Washington County. I'm anxious to see a full-time ferry be established in Campbello, and for the federal government to play a role in that. And more and more, as I look at the ferry file in Ottawa's involvement with ferries in British Columbia, I actually see, I've discovered it's not just limited to infrastructure, but a longer partnership. So if there's an election, if I'm re-elected, I'm going to begin to kind of tackle that. I've had success getting Ottawa, the federal government, to signal it's open to helping funding the infrastructure. But now let's take the next step, because I know, running a ferry is not cheap, and it's a concern the province has. So if Ottawa can do more, I'm going to try to make sure we make sure that New Brunswick is being treated the same way as British Columbia and other provinces are, and I do think there's an opportunity there.
Your office is obviously right by the border. We were at the border Monday to cover the reopening for Americans coming in. It was an hour and a half, sometimes 2-hour wait for some of the people we spoke with as soon as they crossed. Have you noticed, just from your actual literal perspective from where your office is, if it's slowing down or if it seems to be holding steady?
No, I'll be honest. I am noticing more people as they get through. They're kind of going on their phones, and I see the plates from parts of New England, primarily New York. So there's more licenses, U.S. license plates in St. Stephen, but I haven't really noticed the kind of the flow so much, because I tend to kind of fly into the office. You get work done, and then I'm out again. It's usually if I kind of take a few minutes to kind of walk up and down the street to see someone that I notice it. But it's I'm noticing it in town here in St. Andrews. I'm noticing it elsewhere. I see Texas plates. I see plates from all over the United States. So it's had a, anytime you've got not only this borders, but borders all up through New Brunswick with lineups for hours and hours, it signals there's a serious number of U.S. vehicles coming in, not only to New Brunswick, but also heading into PEI, Nova Scotia as well.
We've obviously been very lucky in New Brunswick just to be as protected as we were compared to other places. But with the borders reopening, how do you see the fourth wave affecting your riding? And are there any, I know that there was news this week about Moderna being produced in Canada potentially next year. Do you have any updates on how we will achieve any kind of herd immunity and from a domestic perspective?
I mean, I hope, and the limited data I've read about the fourth wave, for those that are vaccinated, it is much less serious than it has been, which is, and given our high vaccine numbers in New Brunswick, is it over 80 for one shot, over 70 for two, those are high numbers. And so, I continue to encourage people to get the vaccine, because it is I think the way to ensure that not only is that person going to be safe, but the community. So I feel, I'm confident, but having said that, there is concerns. You see that in other provinces, BC, Alberta, Ontario. They are having some high case numbers. We're gonna have to follow to see if that's followed by any fatalities or significant numbers of fatalities, because that could throw us for a loop. But I trust the science, and I'm hoping the vaccine is going to see us through. So more and more, COVID-19 is more like a bad case of the flu for most people. Some, I think, are always going to have to be a little more cautious if elderly people, for example, people that have underlying conditions. But I hope more and more as we learn about COVID-19 and how to battle it, we can get back to a more normal life and lifestyle here in New Brunswick. But you're right, we have been very fortunate, I think, in New Brunswick. We have had very good leadership from at the provincial level, and the committee of the four political leaders in Fredericton, I think, worked very, very well, and wise decisions were made, and New Brunswick has done. New Brunswick has been, I think, one of the best places to be in Canada. It's one reason why so many people are moving here as well, which is both benefits to the economy, but some challenges. And one of the big issues I'm hearing about now is affordable housing. Mm-hmm. What used to be a St. Andrews problem is now a problem throughout Charlotte County and New Brunswick Southwest. And we're going to need a better federal response to both encourage buildings, not just in the big cities, but also in rural communities. And right now, most of the federal policies are kind of geared towards Moncton, Fredericton, St. John. It's not good enough. We need housing in St. Andrews, St. Stephen, St. George, even Blacks. Like it's a problem in rural areas. And again, it's not to build a massive high-rise, but it's a dozen apartment buildings here, a dozen there, more homes that are available for rent to solve this problem, because there are people in our community right now who are losing their homes, being evicted because homes are being sold, and they're not able to find affordable housing right now. So we have to solve that.
And obviously, where we're filming this in St. Andrews, we're even seeing staff shortages in the busy summer months because of the housing crisis. So it's all related.
Well, we can't grow. If we can't attract young families and retain workers, our communities can't grow, and they will stagnate over time, because businesses will have to have reduced hours or not operate at all, and that's a problem if we do want to grow as communities.
What would the federal government do in terms of, would it be incentives to encourage housing developments?
Yeah. So there's some of that, and we're trying to get it more focused on rural communities. So it's loan incentives, it's deferrals of interest. Like, investors are still going to have to put up investment dollars, but if they can find ways to spread out the repayment to keep rents down, that's one example. Also to have the funding from Ottawa tied to a certain number of affordable units as well that are priced at a certain point or below that. It's not helpful, for example, to build apartments that are just priced at $1,000 more or month. We need housing that is going to accommodate the workers in this area as well. So there are a number of incentives that the federal government could do. The biggest problem right now to crack is to get it more oriented to rural New Brunswick, rural Canada, and not just focused on the cities. Because I actually think with COVID-19, we're going to see more growth outside of our cities going forward. But we're partially there yet, but I think this trend is going to continue.
Seeing a lot of people move here as well from other provinces. There has been a silver lining in the sense that New Brunswick has become this ideal place to call a new home. Internet, though, is a factor in whether people can bring their work here, and in the pandemic, so many of us have had to work often from home. What is the latest on rural internet access?
So this, again, is something that I have been very loud about in Parliament, and critical in finding problems with the funding. And it's my job to hold the government accountable. The problem we discovered in New Brunswick, many rural communities were not eligible because existing providers have pledged to improve the service in 5 to 7 years. It's not good enough. People need the service now. And I would like to see a system where new entrants can come in, compete against these existing companies to offer. And I think competition reduces prices. When you have someone who's selling you something, if he or she knows someone else could come in at a lower price, they're going to treat the client better. So we need a system that allows new entrants, like the local business on Grand Manan, the Smalls who offer a very good internet service on Grand Manan and are moving to other parts of Charlotte County. We had to work hard to ensure they qualified for funding. We need to see more of that competing against the big telecom companies so we can see service not in 5 to 7 to 10 years in rural New Brunswick, but quickly. So the Conservative Party is pledging to have rural Canada, all of it, accessible to high-speed internet in the next 4 years. We think it is a priority because of the way people are living. It's not just accessing social media and movies, which is important because that's how people live, but it's also being able to do work remotely because more and more that is where the economy is taking us, and it opens up more opportunities to places like rural New Brunswick, and that's that's a benefit. We've got a great quality of life here, and if we're able to attract young families and entrepreneurs to come to this part of the world, it's going to benefit our communities and it's going to benefit our province as well.
We're coming to the end of the interview, and we are just at such a unique moment in history. We're seemingly coming to the end of the pandemic, but also at the start of a fourth wave. Yeah. What are the concerns of Southwest New Brunswickers that you hear the most at your office, particularly at this point in time?
So, I mean, what makes this riding unique and both difficult is the size. I mean, along the south on the coast, there are fishing families, and they have concerns about conservation and their ability going forward to earn a living. Inland, it's different altogether. The east end of this riding, there is farming. So there really isn't kind of a overarching issue to say. But what I'm hearing more and more is that the price of everything's getting more expensive. The value of our dollar seems to be declining in that we don't get as much for that dollar anymore, and it's getting harder to make ends meet. You know, on top of that, businesses are finding it difficult to attract workers. They're only able, they feel, to pay so much, and they're trying to grow so they can compensate their employees more. But they're, you know, they feel they're stuck as well with high taxes. But I think there's a sense that we should be doing better economically, but we're not for some reason, and it's because there's just some things that are working against, you know, working families right now, and so there's that kind of broad concern. But again, overall, I mean, we hear kind of the issue, you know, for a lot of hunters, they have concerns for the fishing fleet. So it's a big riding, and it you know, to I think represent it well, you really have to visit the different communities, get to know them, and you know, I've been doing that over the summer. I've been taking both Kelly and our little baby Charlotte around. We've been to Grand Manan, Cambridge Narrows, you know, Campbello, and all points in between. It's fun to travel as a family, but it's also important for me to get out and talk to people, because, you know, they got a problem up in Cambridge Narrows where those speedboats are just being used on the lake and rattling windows, and we get them sometimes here in the harbor, and I know what it's like. So, you know, this is a big riding and as they say, all politics is local. So it's a lot of local concerns from one end of the riding to another.
Well, thank you for making the time today. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Vicki.
My guest today has been MP John Williamson for New Brunswick Southwest. I'm Vicki Hogarth, and you're watching Southwest Magazine.